Greetings all, and welcome to Everything Borrowed, where conversations are cultivated between myself and some of the greatest minds in a variety of industries. This episode is presented to you by Blake's Hard Cider, a grower and producer of the sweetest nectar in all the land. If you like your beverages that taste good, are gluten-free, and made with only the finest apples, then look no further. Go to www.blakeshardcider.com to get this uncompromised, handcrafted liquid delivered right to your door. Or just head to your local grocery store and pick some up. You must be at least 21 to enjoy the fruits of our labor mindfully. Today I'm joined by James Rigato, here on the farm to talk all things food, business, and the misconceptions in between. James is the owner of Mabel Gray, which earned Detroit Free Press's Restaurant of the Year. He's one of James Beard's Best New Restaurant semi-finalists and Eater's 21 Best New Restaurants in America. Rigato himself was named a James Beard Best Chef semi-finalist 4 times, a Top Chef Season 12 contestant, and was named the People's Best New Chef, Great Lakes Region by Food & Wine. A Schoolcraft graduate, lover of music and dogs, Rigato is also a philanthropist making real impact within his community. When you talk about like the Rust Belt food scene and the Michigan and maybe even more specifically locally Detroit, how do you think it's progressing in kind of the national scape? Because I know you were able to bring a lot of notoriety, you and a few others that were really to bring attention to the area. But how do you think it's evolved, and what do you think about the pandemic as it relates to just the food industry to some degree? Because I just feel that it's being hurt the worst out of all industries. I mean, quite frankly, and how do we work through that?
So there's a couple of things to unpack there, and and everything you're saying is pretty valid. I think for how we gain notoriety in the Midwest is like the same way we do anything here, is kind of like grit is the #1 ingredient. So like a lot of the chefs in Detroit or Metro Detroit, or honestly, I should say Michigan, because I mean, if you're in the Keweenaw, there's like a grit to just surviving up there. If you're in Traverse City, if you're in Grand Rapids, what I'm saying? So like, I say Detroit often, but I feel like Detroit's the real capital of Michigan. So like, Michigan as a scene, for one, we have incredible unity. There's no restaurant groups that bicker. If you go to like Chicago, there's like, there's One Off, and there's Let Us Entertain You, and then there's the Alinea group. There's these pockets. And there's the Little Goat, which is obviously Stephanie Izzard. So like, you have these groups that like, maybe they're even friendly socially, but you kind of like pledge allegiance.
Sure.
And so like, if you work for One Off, you want to bounce around One Off. You don't really want to like, I'm gonna go work for Alinea. I'm gonna go. Right. So in Detroit, like maybe somebody's got 2 restaurants. But like most of us are like one restaurant. So we want to collaborate. We want to share customer base. We want to show support. Somebody opens, like when She-Wolf opened up, I hosted Anthony, who I've known for my whole life, and I had him take over the restaurant for a week. We like called it She-Wolf, and it's like, hey, my boy's opening up a restaurant, check it out, come get a preview. And then, that generates a buzz, and then, it shows that we're all friends, my customer base gets introduced to him, and then it just grows.
Sure.
And so like, to me, that's something that Detroit does and has that. And I mean, I've done it with Trattoria Stella up in Traverse City. I hosted Miles in January, before the pandemic really kind of took over. Like, I just had him as a guest chef for a night. He just did a couple dishes, hung out, talked to some tables. I
feel like kind of living in the area that we do kind of necessitates that type of collaboration, because it's not like we have the exposure that some of these other markets do. So you have to work together and kind of collaborate in a way that maybe otherwise, you can kind of be set on your island. I think it makes, that Midwest, I don't know if that's like a real thing or the thing, but that Midwest hospitality to some degree is kind of born of the same thing, I think.
Totally. And I just had a chef and his wife from Cleveland came up to the restaurant. This is like maybe a couple months ago. And they own a similar sized restaurant. They're just grinding it out. They emailed us, look, we're coming up, we're so excited. We own a restaurant, what a crazy year. Can't wait to meet you guys. And I sent them a foie gras course, sent them a couple, champagne. I kind of was just like showing love, like, hey, I see you. I know what you're going through. Like Cleveland is 4 hours away, but like we're still that Great Lakes region, blue collar, sweating it out, grit and grinding. And like, when he came in to eat, like we just took care of him, and like literally the next thing he emails us like, oh my God, like what an amazing experience. And to me, like that's the connectivity that I think the Midwest offers. Is like, you could be from Milwaukee, you could be from Grand Rapids, you could be from Cleveland, but like I still connect with you. I know what you're going through. I know what running a restaurant is like in that environment.
Right. And
so like, to me, like that's the conduit of what makes us the Rust Belt. And then I think, how are we going to change in the pandemic? Like, this has been like I almost feel like it's like a hurricane or something. It's like, you kind of got to like wait until the storm is like subsided to even to count the destruction. But I will say, like, chefs are incredibly tenacious, resilient people. Like, I've had a number of people reach out to me like, oh, how are you doing? Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm like, it's chaos, but like my life before this was chaos. So like, I feel like a firefighter or something. It's like you don't count the blazes. You just go in and you fight.
You're
the
in
fire.
restaurants, dude. There's nothing more always crazy than a restaurant.
So like to me, like if your cooler's going down in the middle of service, or like if you know there's like some kind of catastrophe or something burns or delivery doesn't show up, or like you know customers freaking, like you're just always dealing with chaos and adapting every single day. So like that to me is that's just my life.
Sure.
And a lot of restaurateurs and chefs that I know, same thing. We're kind of like tightening our belts, taking on new projects. I have friends that are making edibles for the marijuana industry. I have friends that are like, you know, doing side projects. I have people that are like, you know, selling off one restaurant, investing all in their one main one. And
I feel like when you kind of get into that place, I think it does open up, you know, areas of opportunity that you wouldn't have otherwise explored.
Totally.
Like, you know, maybe, like I noticed your virtual cooking.
I never would have done that.
Like you probably never even thought of doing that.
I never would have, like I literally, I've said no to that before.
Right.
And now I'm on my, like, I have one this Sunday, I think it's my 16th one.
Right.
You know,
and people are digging it.
And people, and like, I like it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I literally, like, I'm cooking with people and I'm watching their reactions and they're asking questions and I'm like goofing around and people are really engaged. And then like 2 months later, I'll have somebody tag me in a picture of a duck they just roasted and it's perfect. And they're like, this is my 3rd duck this month. And you're like, what?
Right.
Michiganders are like literally like breaking down and roasting ducks at home. Like, you know, you couldn't get people to eat duck in a restaurant because they would never had it and they're scared of it. Oh, I heard it's greasy or, you know, like, and now, now I got people that are literally like, check it out. And the duck looks better than most chefs I know.
Right.
It's like, you know, that to me is like, that's the most exciting part. That's the silver lining of this.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's like the eternal optimist in me that wants to think that way, but I do feel that all these industries, you know, nothing's ever going back to like the way it was. Because there's no back.
There's never back.
Yeah,
there's never been a back.
Yeah, and I just feel like the new way in which we'll integrate what we used to do to what we had to do during this, I think that'll be a new paradigm. And I think that, you know, the people who are open-minded and not like overly attached to, you know, I guess, you know, what was and are willing to look forward to what could be or what, you know, what the possibilities are. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity. You know,
totally
that's my hope, and that's like the big silver lining that I keep trying to stay positive towards, because I know our business has evolved in so many ways, and you know, the way in which you just think about work-life balance and people being able to work from home and, you know, all these different things that you're now like, you know, forcing yourself to kind of think through, you know, as kind of a paradigm shift afterwards. And, you know, and that is what I think, you know, is the silver lining. You know, the one thing that I always thought about restaurants, which the one thing that I think I've struggled with most during like the pandemic as a business owner and just as a social person is like restaurants like really brought, and the way in which you do restaurants like really brings a sense of community and kind of connection to kind of what you're doing. And now I feel like it's harder to get that, you know, you know, and you know, I've always loved that about the restaurant and service industry. And, you know, that's been one of the tough things to see is in a pandemic, when you want to be able to be connected, you like can't come and like share that mutual experience, share that bottle of wine, that, you know, that sort of thing. And so, you know, hopefully that will, you know, obviously there's some positive news on the horizon, but, you know, that's the one thing about kind of how we're having to do restaurants now is like, damn, I missed that.
Yeah, I think that's a big loss in this restaurant, in the restaurant industry. Obviously this year's been nothing but like losses, you know what I mean? Obviously like it's immeasurable to the loss of human life, which is obviously why we're doing all this, is to keep as many people safe as possible. But one of the, you know, like the losses of the business aspect is, I can't collaborate. And like Naval Grade was built for collaborations. I mean, I've hosted probably 30 guest chefs over the last 5 years, and some for like a 2-week takeover, some for one night only. And so like there's chefs that are coming into town. There's people that are like, you know, really doing good. Like Max Hardy, you know, he's a chef down in Detroit. He owns Coop, which is a great little restaurant. And like he's doing amazing things right now. And we've been talking about collaboration forever. And like, I want to like, you know, I want to like have him in and host and collab. It's like, I'm seeing people doing things. I want to be a part of it. I want them to be a part of what I'm doing. And that's like one of my struggles creatively is like, it's just like, I'm sick of me, you know what I'm saying? Like, I want others to come and influence me and spend time with people. That's why I travel so much. And I always like, I try to be better at cooking, better at being a human, you know, every single year. I guess that's what my goal now as a chef. And I hit a lot of benchmarks that I wanted to hit. You know, when I was growing up, I wanted to open my own restaurant, and maybe like, you know, when I was 17, I was like, oh, I want to go on Top Chef. And like, okay, I opened my own restaurant at 26, I get on Top Chef at 29. It's like, okay, you better start having some bigger goals because, you know, like you want to have unobtainable goals that you can work a lifetime towards. So now I want to be a better version of myself. I want to connect more, and I want to like help Michigan as a food scene evolve. You know, I want people to understand food and agriculture and the seasonality of ingredients, and I want home cooks to be better at cooking. Those are kind of like my new goals. Right. You know, it's like every time somebody understands, you know, where food comes from and how to process something, like everybody wins. Because they go out and they're looking for it, and they want to try something new. You know, like the more people know, the more they'll spend, the more they'll you know, research.
Right.
You know, if somebody loves cider, they're going to want to taste every single cider here.
Sure.
If someone's never had cider, they want to try one they may like. Ooh, I like this. I'm sticking with this. I'm moving on.
Right.
If somebody comes in here and is like, oh, I heard about you. I love cider. What kind of trees do you have? Give me a flight, and then I'm going to buy these bottles.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's what an educated consumer is. So now my goal is like, I want to connect and educate and inspire and be educated and inspired.
Well, I know even just like from so I can't cook worth shit, man. Like I'm a farmer.
Take one of my classes.
I need to. So, you know, I'm a farmer and you know, my wife's a great cook, so I'm blessed and fortunate for that. But like even during this pandemic, I started getting closer to the ingredients that we would bring into the house, and like, you know, I started making my own jerky and started understanding what cuts of meat make the best jerky. Right. And like, so I found time for these projects, and I got closer, and I just wanted to keep getting closer to the source, because I feel like that kind of breeds community, connection, understanding, and you know, I can't like, you know, help but think like there has to be a better way we can do food, you know, down the road where people can feel more connected and kind of understand the animal that it came from, and you know, and kind of have a better appreciation, you know. And I feel like that has been lost in the last like 20, 30 years, and I think it's kind of reviving because of, you know, people such as yourself who kind of do bring that connection. And you know, now when they're cooking at home, they want to understand, you know, where the meat came from, what different techniques to cook it out, you know. And so I do think that that's another, you know, huge positive in this whole thing.
You know, I was talking to I use C-Roy's over in Yale. It's like a, you know, like a butcher over here, and I called them. I want to say like in May. It was just like checking in, like, how you guys doing? You know, like what's the story? And they basically were like, they had months and months backed up of cows scheduled to be butchered because people were kind of like buying quarter cows, splitting a cow with their neighbor. People are like kind of really, it's funny how like when tragedy strikes, people really revert back to like ancient, old school. You know, and ancient, I mean like 100 years. Yeah, but like, you know, they're doing something like their great grandparents did. Yeah. Like find a cow, slaughter it, freeze it, and we're gonna cook. You know, like it's like, it's funny how people just like, because you know, people ask me like, oh my gosh, is the food chain crashing? And I was like, well, no. If you only want ground beef or chicken breast, it's going to be difficult and expensive. So why don't you buy a duck? And that's why we did a duck class. Right. Or why don't you look into bison? You know, I was like, everyone I know, like the duck, like, because I call my duck guy, and I was like, yo, how's duck? He's like, how many do you want? You know, and it's like, okay, well, there's awesome.
Literally, you have a duck guy, by the way.
Yeah, of course, who doesn't? But there's like thousands of ducks available, but there's no chicken breast. I think the consumer is the issue. Go buy a different product. Right. But that's a big threat, I think, to America as a country, as a culture, as a food scene, is the homogenization of everything. Just like everything's monotonous. You know, like monocropping, obviously we run into GMO issues. Like only wanting chicken breast, you run into, you know, salmonella and outbreaks and unsafe working conditions. You know, we used to have thousands of slaughterhouses. Now we literally have like 600 and something. It's like, you know, like the less we diversify as people, food, beverage, the worse off we are. Right. So like the more we can do, the more we can grow, the more we can eat and learn, the better off we are.
Right. Yeah. And I just feel like, you know, now, you know, through these new channels though, there's going to be opportunities. So like I had this business idea. I kept wanting to like think about, because I saw how the restaurant like industries like been devastated and sit in and dine in, but you know, fast food is like through the roof.
Oh, it's crazy.
It's crazy. I mean, and like, you know, people need to stop eating McDonald's as much as they are. It's fucking crazy. But you know, why can't like the way in which you did like Mabel, like could we do like a fast food like version where it's like all locally sourced, like burgers and fries and like whatever, and like have like a localized non like franchisable like concept for like a drive-through? Is like that a thing that you guys are talking about? Because you should be. I think it's a good idea.
You know, what's funny is that actually there's a couple of chefs, you know, Daniel Patterson and I think it's Daniel Patterson and Roy Choi did it out in LA. They did like a kind of all natural organic fast food chain, and they kind of honestly like they kind of got crucified over it. Like,
seriously?
Yeah, like it was like, I think it was like overly ridiculed, and it had too high of expectations because it was like these Michelin chefs trying to do, you know, so like that honestly, like you're not the first person to come up with that.
I can't imagine.
It's been a Rubik's Cube for a while, and I think you see people like, you know, Shake Shack kind of like dabbles in some of those ideologies,
right?
But obviously it's still fast food. You know, you have like people like, you know, Culver's will try to like claim that they're doing, you know,
right?
Even with like Wendy's fresh never frozen beef, which has always been funny to me because like,
yeah,
you know, it's like if you could take a turd and like, keep it fresh.
Fresh,
doesn't mean
right?
Fresh is not always best if it's not great to begin with,
right?
Not, you know, whatever. I mean, I'm not judging Wendy's, but like these terms,
sure,
you know, basically confuse people into thinking that it's like better for you, and like, you know, fresh or frozen, low quality is low quality,
right?
So don't think that, you know, these buzzwords are better. But yeah, I mean, somebody's been trying to do. You know,
I feel like there's a way in which it can work. I'm sorry if it's offensive to people who are like, you know, Michelin, you know,
no,
James Beard chefs, but like I just kept thinking like there has to be a way which you could take the connection that like, you know, restaurants like yours and other great chefs in the state and like find a way to like turn that into a model that could be like, I mean, connect. But like,
I'm sure it exists somewhere
yeah,
in this country. There's a fast casual, super organic. I mean, look at like most burrito shops in San Diego, like, you know, there's tons of amazing little vegan outlets. So fast casual, drive up, drive through, high quality, organic. I know it exists.
Right.
But like, how do you make it, like the second that you want it to grow to scale, you have to find, you know, sourcing and wholesaling. So like, no matter what, to me, the biggest problem is going to be in that kind of like monotony and that homogenizing of like food systems,
the supply chain,
right? It's like that's been the biggest threat across the board. Is like, you know, for instance, in New York State they just banned foie gras, and so
that's insane, by the way.
I'm very sure California, because honestly I can't keep up. Chicago banned it and then it went away, and then California I think still has it because Sonoma produces it. I think New York City just banned it, but New York State produces a decent amount of it. So like Hudson Valley does. So like, I can't keep up with who's banning or where, you know, what's the biggest threat towards foie gras. But what's ironic to me is like, if you look at the foie gras production, the biggest scandal is that they put a feeding tube down the throat of the duck and then force feed it corn. Some people are like, force feeding, it sounds violent.
Sure.
If you ever see a duck in the wild, they literally eat fish as the fish is like sticking all its spikes out and they swallow it down because the esophagus lining is like super resilient.
Sure.
So like, it's not being hurt. And I mean, if you don't eat foie gras, do whatever you want. I'm just telling you like what I've learned. And that these ducks have been, you know, when the duck flies, right, it gorges on food, it gets a naturally fattened liver, it's a migratory bird, and then it has the fuel to fly across, you know, wherever it's going. So like, Egyptians were fattening birds,
sure,
to then eat, you know, their swollen organs and fat, you know, rich livers. So like, force feeding ducks doesn't sound glamorous. Foie gras is a luxury item. I understand why it's frowned upon by some, but yet you look at like the chicken industry or the pork industry. Like if you go to some of these like pork farms and you see the way these pigs are raised, they're literally chewing the tails off of the pig in front of them because they're so stressed out. And then but yet this like, you know, this boutique fattened liver is like banned, but yet you can go and get the cheapest, like whatever. You know, you can go to
who has the lobbyist? Foie gras doesn't have a lobby, right, for
bacon,
the industry.
You know, it's like bacon's literally like the nitrates are killing you, and like the pig is raised in a horrible environment, but yet that's smiled because everybody loves bacon. That's an example of like how fucked up the food system is.
Right.
So like to me, like you really have to like calm down, listen, talk to farmers, talk to chefs, and kind of like make good decisions for yourself.
And how much of that is education? It's people freak out of the idea of like force feeding an animal, but they don't, you know, do they spend the time to talk to chefs or talk to, you know, farmers who've been doing it and connected to the practice and like, you know, how much different is it than X, Y, or Z? Is it just,
that's what I'm saying,
you know,
if you don't want to eat foie gras, it's perfectly fine with me, but like, I hope you hold those same ethics towards every part of the agricultural industry.
Sure.
So I really hope that you're like, what palm oil are you buying? You know, like what coconut milk? They literally train monkeys to go up trees and like bring down coconuts, and these monkeys are like tortured. You better be buying the right coconut milk if you're banning foie gras.
Right.
So like,
where does it end? It's like all the way down.
Like you know, and pun intended for you, we like to cherry pick things that like fit our like, you know, our Instagram feed for that moment. Right. You know, like boycott foie, and then like, you know, you're eating Chick-fil-A. Like, hey, like do whatever you want, but like
just don't be a hypocrite.
Yeah, I'm not going to totally subscribe if you're like, you know, you're not as transparent. So I walk around like I know nothing, and I'm constantly trying to learn as I go.
Right.
So like my ideas and point of view is constantly up for grabs. If you educate me and I see something, I'm willing to change my mind 100 times.
Yeah. Well, that's probably why you're successful, dude. Because I think that's just like one of the most healthy ways to think, is that you're constantly evolving, you're constantly changing, and you're constantly up for grabs what you don't know, and you understand that you don't know a lot. That's why
that's I'm 36. Like at 26,
take on the world.
Exactly. You're like I know so little that I think I know a lot, and then it's like once you get to the Grand Canyon, you look over the edge, you're like, oh shit,
right?
I don't know anything.
Right.
It's like that's I think where I've gotten in my last 5-6 years is like, okay, like I'm more happier with me as a flexible person absorbing than I am trying to like tell everyone.
Don't you feel like if you come out of your 20s and you're not like a psychopath, you've done like a good job? It's
20s are tough,
it's kind of rough because you you have all these ideas and you have all these things you think and then you have a few wins, then you got to like bring your ego back down.
Yeah,
you like constantly doing this.
Oh, for sure.
Doing this fucking thing.
And you asked too, like it's like I grew up in Howell. And like a single mom, my dad was around, but not totally. And like I grew up pretty poor, and I didn't have a lot of support. So I got a job at 14, on my 14th birthday, working in a diner. And like once I went to restaurants was when I felt supported.
Sure.
I felt like this, like I felt like some kind of like lost soul, like almost. I always joke like there's so many things in pop culture that like literally like make me feel connected, but like. In the Ninja Turtle movie, when like the dude sees the Foot Clan for the first time, like Danny the son, he's running away from home and he sees the Foot Clan, and it's like skateboarding and video games. He's just like, oh, he wants to be a bad guy. That's how I felt about restaurants. I saw these like burnout kids and tattoos and like dyed hair, and like this is Howell. Keep in mind, since it's like a small, super white, boring community. So like when I saw restaurants, it was probably the most exciting culturally a
thing
place
that you had in Howell.
So I was like, whoa, this is like where you can be yourself, and you can that was the first time I work with someone who was gay or someone. It just was like, wow, like alternative lifestyles are like right in front of me, and so I just was like, I was hooked. I was like, you can be individual, you can do whatever you want, and then I got good at it. I started flipping pizzas, and I remember the grill guy at this restaurant I was working. I was like 16. The grill guy was kind of an asshole, and he quit one day. And so I'm like making pizzas, and the chef's like, "Yo, you want to work the grill?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think I can handle it." And I worked it, and I did good. And they were like, "Oh, cool, you're the new grill guy." And I was like 16, and this whole kitchen was like in their 20s. And I just they would schedule me, and I just came in. So like if I skipped 6th hour, or if I worked till midnight, I just did it.
Right.
I was like, walk right at me to school. This is pre-smartphones and shit. So I was literally just I'm scheduled at 1:30. I just like go out in my car and just drive to work. I started working. So I was working super full time, making pretty good money at 16, and then I moved out at 17. Went to school craft, and I've been pretty much independent since I was about 16, and making enough money to sustain myself. And that's all because of the industry.
Right.
So and the one thing about this industry is I feel like every dollar I invested in it, like $1.50 came back. So I just was like,
I'm equation, man. Yeah, never need to leave.
I never stopped. I just fell in love with it. So that means, I'm basically 21 years, 22 years now of being in restaurants. And I'm a young guy.
Right.
But I think the last 5-6 years are where my real education came, as an owner. Because when you own something, you really, and
how do you kind of characterize, your thinking of yourself into your future? Are you a chef? Are you an artist? Are you an entrepreneur? I mean, you're obviously all those things, but which one do you kind of align with at this point? Because I know it kind of changes for me. Like I used to think of myself as kind of a farmer, and then it was kind of business guy or whatever, and then it was now it's more of a creative kind of entrepreneur type thing. So it kind of has evolved a little bit. I mean, I'm still obviously in touch with all those roots and all those kind of points, but I'm just curious because I feel like at what point does the chef stop cooking and is managing restaurants, and is that is that where are you happiest on the grill? Because my dad and uncle, they are entrepreneurs in the full sense. But their office is their truck. Yeah. They're farmers, dude. They're out in the fields. That's just what they do. You know, and so that's kind of their embodiment. Kind of throughout. So I'm just curious which one of those. Is
I think the one thing I feel I am every single day is like a dishwasher. That's what that's my first job. That's it's where the day begins and ends.
Yeah.
And so to me I feel like no matter what happens, that's my job. It sounds trivial, but that's who I am at my core. It's like I'm a dishwasher. It's like you come into this industry at the bottom, and I feel like I always joke that I'm retiring as a dishwasher.
Right.
It's honestly where it's the most meditative job that I have.
Yeah.
But like, you know, I think a cook or a chef is really like, that's like my soul, that's my identity.
Sure.
When it's just me and food and a fire, like that's,
right.
That's where I feel the most at peace, I guess.
Yeah.
But like, I think the part of me that I've been the most sensitive about and really like, I think the most about is like a member of my community, whether it's like chefs or, you know, Michigan or, you know, the Midwest. I really think about who am I, what do I want to communicate to my city and to my state and people that pay attention. And even I have a small following compared to others, but like I want to make, if I'm representing Michigan, if I'm representing chefs, I want to be very conscious and considerate and sensitive to it. So I think like, you know, whether that's community member, community leader, I think it's important to me that like I really do the best work there.
I think the important thing is that you're mindful of that, you know, and I think that, you know, no matter what your opinion is, you know, politically, community-based, you know, as it relates to restaurants, I think as long as anyone is mindful about what they're thinking and what they're saying and what they're communicating, I mean, I think you're going to end up with a pretty good result, you know, and that's kind of the color and the spectrum of like, you know, of humans is like, as long as you're being mindful and you're being thoughtful and trying to, you know, not cause harm and, you know, and help, you know, I feel like as long as you're coming from those places, no matter what the, you know, the opinion is, if you will, like, you know, I can get down with that. You know, that's kind of how I feel, and I think that's why, you know, people like you know, have earned the following and the success that you have, because you obviously are mindful about those things, and where other people can let their egos or their opinions of themselves or whatever get in the way, you know, you kind of always are having to check that and you know, kind of follow back, bring back to like base humility, like obviously always a dishwasher. You know, that's like that is like such a I think like a fundamental essence of people who are successful is you never kind of lose sight of kind of you know where it all started, where it all is going to end.
I'm very comfortable with saying like I know in my soul that like whether I own a bunch of restaurants and I'm just that humble CEO, or if I literally sell it all or have nothing and just go and wash dishes in a pub, like I'm telling you, I'm going to retire in a dish tank. I know it. It's like I'm going to be perfectly comfortable with it. You know, it's like where it all started.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But to me, like I think what, you know, a big point of what you're saying too is like you're a farmer, right? And you make cider. I'm a chef, and I host people in a restaurant. Like those things are ancient, and they're important, and they need to be, you know, bipartisan, and they need to be like, you know, completely supportive of all walks of life. Right. And that's like, I talk to my, you know, chef friends and cooks. I really teach my staff that. I'm like, never bring up politics. Never make somebody feel alienated for what they believe or who they are. And I have a very cool, wonderful staff, and they never would anyways. Right. But that's just something that I really try to teach my cooks and my chefs is like, you know, everybody deserves the opportunity to break bread and understand. You don't know when someone's going to change their mind. It's probably not going to be by your Facebook post or by a rant. Like, why don't you like, you know, we offer hospitality, we give food and service, and like all opinions, you know, exist whether you like them or not, and you're better off like, you know, you're going to change someone's opinion with love and warmth. Not with like, you know, resentment and anger. Yeah,
fire and brimstone.
Right.
You know?
So to me, like, I think that your best way to communicate to somebody is through love and service and hospitality. And it's like, that's kind of what I love about this industry is like, I have tons of friends that I disagree with. I mean, like there's you know, politicians that I didn't vote for that come in that are like, you know, wonderful people and you know, we support. And so like, I think it's important that like, we're all human. We're all stuck on this planet together for the time being. Like, we really need to be better to each other. Right. And we really need to calm down thinking our opinions are more valuable than they are.
Yeah, I think that goes back to that humility that I think everyone in the restaurant industry has. I know as a farmer, like you're just kind of, you know, you're forced to be humble just by Mother Nature. I mean, because, you know, that just is the ultimate. You could have all the plans for, you know, you're planting your crops, you know, if it doesn't rain, the sun doesn't come out, you know, the shit doesn't grow. Right. You know? And so you're just constantly humbled, you know, kind of by that. And I think that if more people had, you know, a connection to like, and I think that's where it comes from, ancient kind of origins of kind of the profession that you're in.
Yeah, we're providers.
Yeah, right. And so you always feel, you know, kind of connected to that. And I think that really does serve as like as a humble base, you know, to kind of, you know, check your opinions and check your, you know, where you're, you know, the momentum that you maybe didn't even realize that you were building up in a direction that maybe you need to pull back from, or just step back from for a bit, and we need more than that. And that was one of the big ideas about trying to do this podcast was to just have these conversations with people who have great opinions, and and be able to highlight some of the ways of being, and so other people could borrow those ways of being and apply them to their life a little bit.
And I'm like I said, I'm constantly listening to others, and like there's people that inspire me, and I think it's just more, especially as we move forward in our generation and even younger, it's like we need to I think especially us and younger, 40 and younger, we are really the future of this planet. And we really need to listen to each other and kind of be patient and not as cruel. Right. And I think and that's like you said, Mother Nature, I'm in the industry of, restaurants, we're in pretty cruel industries just by the nature of them. Yeah. And I think that the last thing we need to do is extend that cruelty or difficulty to the human relationship.
Yeah, and the other thing we got to do is get involved calmly. Is whether it's in I just ran for the school board because I'm passionate about education and supporting trades programs and entrepreneurship. Just in Armada, it's a small local school that treated me really well. And I want to give back to that, and I want to try to help in any ways that I can. But just people getting involved in their local community, their in politics even. If you want to do it calmly and you want to do it with a sense of humility of trying to make your community better, that's a noble pursuit. But it's gotten away from being anything noble and just kind of this frowned upon thing. That it's okay, well, if our generation wants to do it differently, it won't be bad. It'll be good. Yeah. It'll be a pursuit worthy of of celebration, because you're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, I encourage all business owners and young people to really educate yourselves on how politics work and how cities work. Because I'm in Hazel Park, and the city is people always ask me why Hazel Park. I learned when I opened the Root in White Lake. I was there for about 4 years, and I learned. I was like, oh wow, okay, the municipal support means a lot. I didn't really think about that when I first opened the Root. So I went to Hazel before I did anything. I went and I called the city office. I went in there. I was like, I want to open a restaurant in the city. Can I meet with you guys? It was the city planner, city manager, city attorney, all on one side of the table. I said, hi, I'm James. And they were like, oh yeah, we know. We used to watch Top Chef. We know. I'm like, okay, cool. And I was like, I want to open a restaurant here. What's it like? What do you guys like? What's the red tape? And they're like, let us know. Basically, we are your defensive line, and you have the ball, and we will push it as far as we can. And I was like, that's amazing. Yeah. There's other cities you meet with that the city manager won't even take your call. Right. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm clearly going to go to the business with Hazel Park. And then the city planner kind of literally got in his car and showed me all the buildings that are available for lease and for sale. And was pointing out, here's the issue with this one, here's the issue with that one. Take your pick. What do you like? And then we went from there. Right. So I felt so supported from day one of opening a restaurant. It's that's something that I didn't know until I opened a business, realized how important the city support was, and then started with the city instead of calling a space for lease and forcing my way in. Right.
Well, that's one of the reasons if I can be a proponent for small towns. I know people think that they're oh, I'm from Armada. It's a town of 2,000. Yeah. But I knew everyone in my school. I knew everyone by name. There was a sense of connection to that, and I know it can be limiting to a degree. But one of the things I always loved about being from a small town is you have a better sense of community, or it's easier, maybe not better, but it's easier to have a sense of community because it's smaller and you kind of need each other, and the one butcher in town, and the one, the farmer who's selling his cows across the street, and so you kind of have a little bit more of connection to that. And as it relates to as it relates to school, I think that also kind of plays into it. So I think that the way in which small towns can be progressive in some sort of way, we would never be able to do what we do out here
without the city's support.
Without the city's support, and they've been fully supportive. And and you just take for granted, I think, or can take for granted when we always talk with other businesses who have a hell of a time. Yeah, it's hard enough to run a business. It's hard than to have all these obstacles in the way that you have to work with on a community basis. And I think as business and community and even politics kind of become more connected, I think that should lead to positivity, but it's going to take our group getting involved. I think
if you're a business owner, and that's the thing is when the big guys, the big corporations get too involved, it makes it harder for the little guy. But I think there's a lot of towns out there, there's a lot of cities that want your support. Right. And if you're opening a restaurant or a site, whatever it is you're doing, like go find cities that will support you. Because nowadays, social media, everyone has cars in the Motor City. Like, you know, if you're one city over from your dream location, you'll be just fine.
Right.
I mean, like, you know, people always say, oh my God, why Hazel Park? And then, you know, but yet they're there in my dining room, and they're from Bloomfield or Birmingham or Detroit, or, you know, or Ann Arbor, and they're like, this is a crazy location. I'm like, yeah, but you're here.
Right.
You know? So like, to me, I think like, don't be afraid to like change your plan. Like, let's say like, I want to open a restaurant in, you know, Main Street, so-and-so town, and it doesn't work out. It's okay. Like,
maybe
you know,
for a reason.
Yeah, adapt and overcome. It's probably for a reason.
Right.
You know, you look at, I mean, you look at, there's a lot of cities around town, around the southeastern Michigan. There's a lot of cities that were once just like, if you were on Main Street, you were guaranteed to succeed. And now you drive down those main streets and they're ghost towns.
Right.
Because the cities don't know how to manage the business relationships.
When you talk about, you know, kind of your current as-is state, you know, in Hazel Park, you know, when you look at your, you know, your horizon over the next 5 years, growing as a, you know, as a family man, as, you know, as an entrepreneur, as a chef, you know, what is kind of, you know, what are the goals you're kind of setting for yourself to kind of, you know, evolve to a little bit? Because I feel like, you know, you talked about earlier in your career, in your life, you kind of set these goals, and you talked about trying to set like higher ones, and you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I'm just curious, you know, is it expanding outside of Michigan? Is it really staying more connected and growing, you know, things here? Like, where's your head at with those opportunities?
So I love Michigan. I don't think I'm ever really gonna leave. You know, So like I'm very invested in the Keweenaw, on the top of the UP. So I do a lot up there. So I have friends and some opportunities that I'm going to continue to pursue. So obviously it's 10 hours away. So it's the same distance as New York City. So like technically I'm definitely looking outside of southeastern Michigan. But you know, I think that it's important. For me as a business owner, I'm a small business owner. I'm pursuing to be debt free. That's a goal. I try to encourage people my age the same thing. Is like, get out of the trappings, you know, of debt. I talked a lot to, like, you know, culinary schools. I speak at Mott for graduation when they graduate from the Flint school, you know, the culinary school in Mott. And I try to give them really good, transparent advice about money. Because like when I was coming up in school, no business owner came and said, here's how much it cost me to operate my business, you know. So I try to be transparent with them and talk about the trappings of like a bad mortgage rate or a landlord versus owning the property. You know, there's a lot of trappings.
Credit card debt.
Yeah, credit card debt, student loan debt. You know, honestly, even like, you know, when to start a family, like, it's none of my business. You do whatever you want. But like, I'm 36. I don't have any kids. I chose that because I didn't want to be like, okay, I have to stop now and have a family. And so like, that was a personal choice that I made.
Sure.
Live your life however you want. But like, people are like, oh my gosh, you're so young. You open a restaurant. Here's what I did. Right. I avoided debt. And I pursued professional, you know, career over anything else. And I strategically chose cities that would support me, low overhead. There's things that I did. Right. So I'm pursuing to be debt free as a business owner, to kind of clear the table and then look at other opportunities that I want to find revenue streams without large amounts of debt attached. Sure. And I feel like the average restaurateur is stuck in those ways. You know, it's like, can I get a $2 million loan to do this? Maybe I'll get a 10% return. It's like, it's constantly like loan, hoping for return, loan, hoping for, and it's like, I don't want to have to do that. I'll do that if I want to, but I don't want that to be the algorithm I'm stuck in. Sure. So like before pandemic, I was traveling a lot. I was, you know, I had culinary trips in Italy that we were going to do. I had, you know, catering at the Kentucky Derby. So I was working with Angry Orchard to, you know, do it like
that's
catering.
awesome.
Yeah, so
that's awesome.
I will travel, and I will, you know, and I will continue to do that. I love, you know, but that's again, that's like an event. That's a revenue stream and something about I connect with people without debt. You know, it's not a business. Right. So I want to continue to do a lot of that. That's really been a great path for chefs over the last 20 years. Is like, you know, small contract events, you know, like kind of hosting a dinner or hosting a festival, or, you know, so I really think that's a great part about being a chef. Sure. You travel, you meet people, you have these experiences, and you can make a little bit of money, but then, like, you know, not have to commit your whole life to it. Sure. Because in the chef world, if you open a restaurant, it's like having a kid. It's like, you know, that for, you know, those first 5, until they are in school and you can pass them off for a little bit, first 6 years is just like you and that baby. Right. You know, like win, lose, or draw, you're there. Right. And so I don't want to pursue multiple restaurants because I don't think that that's the most, you know, stimulating use of my time. One restaurant is like, it's a creative outlet. It's like my little art gallery. Yep. I don't need to have 20 art galleries. Like, one is enough, and then I can pursue other avenues, you know, free of debt.
Truly fascinated, man, and I think it's not any mystery why you're successful or why people gravitate towards you, and just any way we can be help with the connection, Michigan connection with agriculture.
Totally.
Otherwise, love to kind of explore that down the road.
Yeah, but honestly, I think considering we've done nothing together, I think that there's only up to go.
Sure.
But yeah, I'd love to learn more about what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
I definitely my personal interests because I'm in a restaurant setting and I'm doing tasting menus. I lean towards wild, natural, funky, or ciders.
Of course.
So I think that as I'm sure as you guys continue to evolve and kind of pursue those projects, there's only more opportunity for us.
That's the thing that cider really needs, is that connection and that elevation of the farm, the farmer, the apple grower.
Yeah.
And from me being a third generation apple grower, that's exciting because it just hasn't really had that kind of a store, yet, because people haven't gotten. There haven't been people to teach people about that as much. You know
what's funny in my relationship with cider is I see two things. For one, I came into beverage mostly through wine. I was working under, Master Sommelier Madeline Truffaut when I was 21, totally unaware of how, valuable she was as a resource then. Over the years, I've obviously continued to tap that resource and host her for events and mine her brain. So I've learned a lot about wine through her and all of her affiliates. But cider to me kind of came later, and it's wine has obviously been the juggernaut of the beverage world. And then you have beer, which in Michigan has been the last 20 years kind of been the hurrah. And then in between you have cider, and it's the curse of cider, in my opinion, is that it's regarded as a gluten-free beer alternative, and yet it's made like wine. So the wine drinkers don't care about it or don't think about it, and then the beer drinkers don't understand it. And so it's
confused.
Cider. The worst part about cider is probably the name cider, because people don't know what to do with it. If it was just like wine, which is what it is, then if we could just give it its own category, like you say champagne or like you say Burgundy, you understand all the things that go into it. It'd be nice if cider had this class that wasn't just this mystery. If you say cider, it's okay, well, is it fresh juice or is it hard or is it mold?
Oh, you're right. Exactly. And I think that's what we even here. We have cider, we have hard cider, mulled cider, and people just call it all cider, and it doesn't really have its own distinction from an alcohol category. And then you even look at how the government taxes it. They don't even know what to do with it.
Exactly.
It's some of it's if it's made a certain way, it's taxed like it's champagne, and it's who's gonna buy a $30 bottle of cider when they don't understand it?
And you're seeing that with piquettes now too. I feel I have some cider makers who are doing the juice on, which piquette is typically water on crushed grapes, but the juice on crushed grapes. Okay, now you have, a cider fermented on grapes. Now, just trying to get that to market. I've done collaborations with
what is it? What is it when you do that?
How do you bill it? So it's such an and that's the funny part too. And there's that in fruit, tomatoes are billed as a vegetable, but botanically they're a fruit. And it's so funny, the government doesn't understand food then or now. So the agriculture world kind of is left to its own devices.
Yeah.
But I think that cider to me, and in America especially, we also have post-prohibition where all of our good varietals are torn out and burned. So we basically have
preaching to the choir here, brother. I'm so pissed about that.
We basically are we're in the land of John Gold and Macintosh. Whereas if you go to East Coast where they didn't really have as much tear outs, you can find 300-year-old trees. It's crazy gnarly varietals. I mean, even the words Pippin, these things don't exist in Michigan. We're funny because we have so many great trees and we have so many great
they exist here.
Producers, but they're just they're not as understood.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's the weird thing. We were talking with our our R&D team, who's working on trying to develop some products for end of 2021, 2022. And we're trying to link up with vineyards, and we're trying to do kind of some wine cider blends. But like you're saying, getting into finding the varietals that you would want to blend with unique wine varietals, and just kind of to explore what that is. It's you can't find the varietals first off, and you got to go to East Coast, or you got to go to specialty growers in the West Coast, and that's why we've planted the last 3 years 5 acres each year of these varietals that hopefully. But they're really hard to grow. And that's the other thing too, is they're not used to the climate here. They haven't been conditioned for Michigan. So when you get into root stocks and how to really propagate proper trees for the for the region they're in, they're all they're in more temperate climates is what they're based on. So they handle our winters hard here. So you get into this whole challenge of trying to bring that type of terrier to this region, and it's a challenge, and we need only thing that will probably bring it is, the growth of cider or the understanding of cider.
Yeah, and that's the thing where like even to me, like with the sweeter stuff, like obviously that's the big net, right? That's the gill net for the pedestrians. It's like, come on through. We got fresh, we got cinnamon, we got these flavors. But like, what you also want to be careful of, it's like in a restaurant world, it's like you want to have a cheeseburger to like, that way that someone checking you out for the first time doesn't leave. Right. You want to capture that dollar and you want to capture that interest, but you want to recruit them to the tasting menu eventually. Right. So like, to me, if everything is cinnamon spiced and sugary, you're going to basically you're going to brand yourself in the wrong light if you won't drag them over to the nuanced and to the, you got to like seesaw like that.
Well, that was always the thing that I struggled with is like with Blake's Hard Cider, when we, kind of picked the portfolio that we did, we wanted to cast a wide net and bring more people into the cider umbrella, and then, have things on the back end that really kind of show the artisanry and,
and keep them around as they grow.
As they grow with their understanding, their taste buds grow. And I have to imagine that, I feel like that's some things that producers and, maybe restaurateurs and chefs, get wrong to a degree. It's like, they're so proud to some degree that they want to really show their skillship, but you got to do enough to bring the masses kind of into the conversation and teach them, because I think they want to learn about it. It's just a matter, and that's our job as like I guess as a cider maker, or as
it's funny because in the pandemic this year, I was making a joke because like Michigan never gets like a lot of James Beard attention. We never, we're kind of overlooked in Detroit. And then kind of this Rust Belt, this kind of blue collar. I made a joke because like, when I first started cooking, it was like, 9/11 happened. And obviously that changed the economy crashed and everybody was terrified. And, the restaurant world suffered hard in 9/11. And then I was like, then I kind of was climbing the ranks and getting my career going. And then the recession happened. Right. And so I was joking, like every 10 years, I got to like make crab cakes and meatloaf because like, just like all the momentum is, breaks. And I was like, well, that's why Detroit, like every 10 years, this, Michigan has to like go back to eating, meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Hey. And so like, I think that there is cycles to those things. And so most restaurateurs, I'd say most in the country want that wide net. And maybe their top tier item is like a steak or a prime rib or lobster tail. And then you have some chefs, and there's a good amount in Michigan that like take chances, really study hard. And then maybe you're getting a guest liver for the first time or like oysters for the first time, and you have to reward them. That's something that like at Mabel we get all the time, is somebody who's like, oh, I don't like this or I don't like that, or I've never had that. And my number one job is to give them something for the first time and have them enjoy it. So how do you give somebody oysters and make them enjoy it when they've never had oysters before? It's like you're dealing with like new and then like fear, and it's like, people like, if their mother told them, oh, that's gross, then you're scared of it because your parents, and like Michigan has a lot of that. Right. People think they're allergic to seafood and they didn't even try it. So, I think it's important to like,
my wife.
Yeah. It's important to like kind of like slowly educate, but then reward when they take risks.
Yeah, right.
So like, I'll always have a cheeseburger or a chicken, something to kind of like, don't worry, you're safe here. But then when you take that jump, you're rewarded. Sure. And there's a lot of cider producers, in my opinion, that across the country that they come out of the gate swinging, and they're like, oh, we do, whether it's pet nat or, all wild ferment, or all, it's all open air, or it's, we ferment bone dry and then back sweeten, and like, there's flaws in the site. It's like, you shouldn't be doing this. I'd rather have you just make a clean, honest juice, arrest the fermentation, give me something sweet, than give me this like flawed product that is, that basically is like, you got something contaminated in your lines and every cider tastes like the same flaw. I'd rather have you not trying so hard. Maybe have just one good cider and work from there. Right. And restaurants are like that too. Sure. Where somebody's in there, some 22-year-old chef that they gave the reins to because no one else wants the job, and next thing you know, everything's got like coconut milk and like uni, and it's just nothing makes sense. Sure. So I think that across the board, do something well and reward your customers who take risks. And cider's a lot. I hope that the true nuance and specialness of cider can continue to grow. I would love to see small producers like you kind of get your place at the table, and then allow your business to evolve as the tastes evolve. That's the most exciting part about you grow, because I know you guys are growing like crazy. Is like you have a microphone. What I'm saying? It's like, what do you say? Like that, as you grow, that's the most important part, and that's what I think. Like Jim from Boston Beer is probably a mutual hero of ours. Yeah, right. Is like you watch somebody have the microphone a few times and say the right things, you know, like whether it's collaborating with dog, or obviously like merging with Dogfish Head, or like, you know, opening Angry Orchard in the first place.
Right.
A lot of people, you know, Twisted Tea, they own Twisted Tea as well. I don't drink Twisted Tea.
A lot of people do.
And like, it's like, that's a great business decision. So when you look at a portfolio, you're like,
smart.
owning Twisted Tea doesn't mean that like Boston Lager is any, you know, is not a good beer.
Right.
So like, it's super important to kind of look at like big isn't always bad.
Right.
And small isn't always good.
Right. I think that's smart. Well, I think that's a great place to end, man.
Yeah,
Thank you so
absolutely.
much for coming on, and
appreciate
you know,
it.
best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much, man. I'll come out, next time I'll be on mask free.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Let's all hope, and you know, let me know about those apple trees, dude. We'll get you hooked up for next year.
Totally.
So,
I want to come spend like I want to come stage here and learn about the trees.
hey, more than happy anytime, man.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you remember that everything in life is borrowed, so make sure to love hard, work hard, stay humble, and help each other out along the way. Find and subscribe to more of Everything Borrowed episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. If you really want to make our day, drop us a 5-star review so more people can find the work we're sharing. Stay up to date with weekly articles on business, life, and my interactions with amazing entrepreneurs and creators at everythingborrowedpodcast.com. EBP is produced by Chelsea Cox and Jason Brown. Edited and filmed by Nick Ferguson. Art is produced by Adam Yarborough. Everything Borrowed is an after-hours media production. Copyright 2020.